I attend a school by the name of Hallbrook High, a dilapidated facility with teachers that seem to care less than the students. The population of the school, which is only about 400, seemed to merely drift around the school grounds in a half-conscious state, adding to the already gloomy feel of the perpetually cloudy weather. Though I never had many friends, I did hear the rumors that were often circulated among the students, like forbidden profanity uttered in church. There was talk of odd occurrences surrounding a teacher, with details specific enough to make me believe that there actually could be some truth to the rumors that I'd heard. The rumors surrounded Mr. Wexler, a bulbous old man with a reputation of overreactions and peculiar punishments. I cast many of the whispers aside until I had him as a history teacher my senior year, but by then it was too late to realize that the whispers had been true. History can understandably be boring to students that lack a grasp of its importance and relevance to today's society. The unrelatable teacher didn't stand a chance based on subject alone. Wexler proved to be a sour man, one who appeared frustrated and short-tempered. He even threw a balled-up paper at a student who wasn't paying attention on the first day. I, like many others, still did not care about yet another unsavory teacher at Hallbrook, for I had encountered many other teachers at the school that would be deemed as bad. It had just seemed to become an inevitable part of my life at this point. This same disdain that I often felt while walking around school grounds is what inspired a friend and I to get back at Mr. Wexler, who seemed to embody everything we hated most about high school life. Jesse Richmond was the only person I knew that loathed the old man as much as I did. His hyperactive personality made him a bright red target for teachers looking to make an example out of a less than savory student. Jesse, or Jay, as he often requested to be called, suggested we do something a little bit more obvious, such as ripping his papers, destroying his pencils, pens, anything that we can get our hands on. I replied to this and told him my more devious plan. We were going to move everything to the wrong drawer or the wrong file, turn his office space into a flurry of lost items and misplaced notes. I felt this would be acceptable due to Mr. Wexler's impeccable organization and level of scrutiny that rivaled even the most respectable of neat freaks. This would be a way for me to get back at the old man, for all the trouble he had caused me in the times where I was just wishing to keep my head down. Jay took some convincing, but I eventually got him excited on the idea of only disorganizing his things, which was no easy task. I figured it wasn't a bad enough deed for the school to actually try to find who did it, for even they knew Mr. Wexler's reputation among the students. It could easily be any other troublemaker in the school. I felt my plan was foolproof, and before I knew it, Jay and I were standing outside the classroom at an ungodly hour of the night. Entering the room was relatively simple due to the fact that the facilities had not been updated within the last 25 years. The decrepit door was barely even able to stay shut, opening after only the first hard push. We entered the pitch-black classroom and felt the door shut behind us. The musky smell of old coffee and paper filled the air. We waited for a few moments, then turned on our flashlights, wasting no more time on achieving our goal. Going through Mr. Wexler's little amount of personal items felt wrong and intrusive, exactly the feeling I wanted to give him. After watching Jay switch files from one folder to another, I peered around the tired-looking classroom in search of more items to move. I then remembered the life-size dummy that Mr. Wexler had stuffed in the right corner of the room. The uniform that was draped across the dummy's body belonged to Mr. Wexler's father, one of the few things he told us about the uniform that stood ominously in the corner. Moving it across the room to the other corner would be the perfect cherry on top for making him just that much more disturbed by us. I grabbed the mannequin and began dragging it across the floor, ignoring the "Do Not Touch" sign draped around its neck. The thing was heavier than I thought, and I struggled to drag the awkward body across the room. When I finally managed to get the uniformed man stuffed into the left corner, I walked back to Jay, who was finishing up with the now chaotic files. I tried to stifle my laughter as I told him about what I'd done, shining my light over to the corner where the body now stood. It came as somewhat of a surprise to find that the mannequin was now facing the wall, away from us. I could swear I turned it towards us to make it that much more dramatic. I figured that I mistook the front for the back in the darkness, and walked back over to the stiff uniformed man to turn him the right way. After, I strolled back over to Jay, who had an odd look upon his face. I stared at him in the darkness, expecting to hear him speak for several moments. He managed to croak out that he wasn't feeling well and wanted to leave. I was at first angered by his decision to leave so soon. After all, we hadn't completed our entire agenda. But I too had a pain deep within my stomach due to fear and nerves that seemed to be overwhelming my very being. Jay started to take his first steps towards the door, and I started following him, but shined my light into the right corner of the room, and I stopped dead in my tracks. He soon let go of the handle and walked over to my rigid body, noticing that I wasn't following him. I had my light shining in the corner of the room still, and he soon found out why I had stopped so abruptly. I rubbed my eyes and looked at the figure that was now in the right side of the room, opposite to where I had dragged it. It was almost as if it hadn't even been moved at all. It was right back where it started. Once more stood the uniformed body within the corner of the dark room, almost taunting me with both arms slightly out. My blood ran cold as I felt the air grow tense and thick with fear. Jay looked over at me with his dim light and yelled several profanities before asking why I was messing with him. I felt panics at it as I tried to explain that it wasn't me who moved the dummy. He wouldn't believe my words and only grew more angry out of fear and frustration. He simply didn't want to accept what had happened and needed a rational scapegoat for his utter terror. His shaky voice told me that much. I was angered and frightened, almost as much as he was. We argued for only a few moments before remembering the real problem at hand. I quickly grew silent and heard deep scraping echoes within the depths of the dank room. Almost simultaneously, we bolted for the door, which seemed to have grown farther away during our short altercation. We couldn't reach the door fast enough and get the hell out of there. It was in these moments that we were sprinting to the door that the terrible grinding noise grew louder and more menacing than before, an unnatural drag that came in threes before stopping. I wildly sprinted to the door and gripped the handle with enough force to whiten my knuckles. The terrible scraping grew louder and continued to sound if it were getting closer and closer with each small scrape that it made across the classroom. I almost covered my ears out of a new sense of terror that enveloped my body. I stole one last look of the dark room in a curiosity invoked only by the sick desire to see what would be plaguing my nightmares. There, at the front of the classroom, just feet behind a terrified Jay, stood the dark uniformed humanoid that seemed to have bolted across the room faster than I could have ran. A sense of horror now washed over me. I jerked the door open hard enough to make the walls of the old building vibrate in their foundations. This was the last I saw of the decrepit dark classroom before slamming the door shut behind Jay. My legs ached and my lungs burned as I ran to my car a mile down the street. I never looked back once, not even to see if Jay was behind me, for the fear of seeing that dreadful uniform lurking in the darkness beyond was too great. I'm considering dropping out before Monday. The only thing I know for sure is that I can't sit another day in that classroom, because the moment I enter that room once more, I know that I'll be sick. Sick to my stomach like I feel now. Sick because I know that it's watching me.